Mom. Oh, sorry. Sorry, we're finished. Sorry. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because I never do it right. Is
So
it?
you want it kind of on the side? Or oh, right.
Yeah. And I never do it close enough, and then they can't hear me. And it's even if it's not the speakers, it's the live recording, so that the recording, like the audio's crisp. We get.
Right.
I mean, our last episode had 150 views after the fact. So I mean, and I've seen it go up to 400. So I mean, a lot of people will watch it after the fact. So we try
Right.
to get good audio.
Oh, and the video's through the phone, right?
Yes, the videos through the phone and Logitech, because we live stream on 2 different platforms.
I just need to make sure I can still reach my drink.
Hold on, let me put my water on the other side. Now that, see? All right. I think we're ready to go ahead and get going. Maybe. My questions are on my phone because I'm trying to be environmentally friendly and not print as many things out, but it never works out because I never remember it's on my phone. Never remember where it is. I can't remember anything. What I'm saying is I'm 30 and have memory loss. I have earlyheimer's. So, okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get going. Talking for our last book of the season, which is kind of insane to think it's May, because I feel like I blinked and it was January, and I'm blinking again and it's May, and June is
Like tomorrow.
yeah.
Next day.
Oh, somebody said June, and I went, oh, that's next month. And they looked at me and they said, no, ma'am, that's next week. And I was like, what? June is next week? I feel like it's happening too fast. But welcome to May, and welcome to Books, Booze, and Brains. For those of you who are new and joining us for the first time, welcome. And for those of you who are returning, welcome back. We're so happy to have you here at Discussionon. And today we're going to be talking about the motherhood complex, and with our wonderful special guest, who we will introduce in just a moment. But first, I do want to go ahead and thank Indiana Humanities, Indiana Sciences, and our Indianapolis Public Library for partnering with us and helping make this book club possible. And because our public libraries are more important now than ever. And so with that, I want to go ahead and say welcome, and welcome our wonderful guest. Introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Wendy Klein. I feel like I can't see you guys. I'm a history professor at Purdue University. My title is I'm the Dima G. Seeley Chair in the History of Medicine at Purdue University. And I mentioned that mostly just because the endowment comes from David Osterly, who just passed away from ALS. He was he created Angie's List, so he was a local Indianapolis figure, and he had a passion for history. And so my named chair is in honor of his grandmother, who was a history major and loved history. So it's a pleasure to be here. You want me to just go into everything?
Talk about your expertise and how it relates to the book.
Okay. Well, I have to bring up Sam, if I may. So there's an inside story, which is that Sam over here, who also, what's your title? Program Associate, Sam Opsal? Opsal. I can't even pronounce it.
Yeah.
He was my student. I taught 2 classes when he was at Purdue. He took 2 of my classes, Women in Health and History of Medicine. And when Sam started, he was a biology major. And so, of course, what was my agenda? I was like, I'm going to convert him. He was a history minor and a bio major. And by the time I finished with him, guess what he was? History major, bio minor, right? Very smart move.
Very.
And then he went on to graduate school, and here he is today. So my passion is kind of the merging of the two, right? That the history of medicine is, at its heart, humanities-based, right? We care about the ideas behind the science, their impact, how individuals and societies also impact science and our ideas and attitudes about it. That's really kind of my passion. So a lot of my students, as you might know, Purdue is very STEM focused.
Yeah.
So a lot of my students are bio majors until they get converted.
Yeah, until they meet you.
Until they meet me. Engineering, pre-med, And by the end of my classes, I really want them to develop a passion for reading. Many of them haven't read a book in a really long time. So yay, I love that you do a book
Go
club,
Sam.
right? I always have my students, I say, raise your hand if you've read a book cover to cover in the last year. And like 95% haven't.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
Why do you want to read a whole book
Yeah.
when you can
In college,
get something on
especially.
your phone? So I want students to fall in love with reading and the idea that ideas matter,
Yeah.
right? All of those things are important. And then in terms of my own background, so I've written 3 books, and they're all kind of involved with some aspect of women's health,
Yeah.
reproductive health, reproductive justice, and medicine. So my first book was about the eugenics movement and the ways in which women were sterilized in the United States. Everyone thinks this is all about Germany, but it actually was here in the US before Germany. So my first book was a history of that, and then a history of the women's health movement in the 1970s. And then my most recent book is a history of childbirth called, I forget what it's called.
Oh.
Coming Home, How Midwives Changed Birth. And now I'm finishing a book on the history of the pelvic exam. So really trying to, yes, I'm happy to talk about that.
Oh, God.
Um,
And it will not be fun things.
So I think Sam thought of me because of this idea, pregnancy, all the biological changes, obviously they take place in particular contexts. I assume most of you have read this book, the fact that she's in the UK, but she's of Dutch origin. So she's kind of forcing us to think about how particular contexts affect the way you experience pregnancy, childbirth, and motherhood.
Oh, yeah.
And thinking about the implications of those are kind of my real interests. And getting people to talk about this stuff. The last thing I'll say, I warned her I could just talk forever, but
I love it. I love it.
is that these are topics that aren't typically talked about publicly necessarily. They tend to be dismissed as either trivial or too private to talk about or not important enough because they don't involve men at the center of the story. And so I have a passion for getting people to think about why aren't we having these conversations? And we need to get more people involved in that kind of dialogue to think about why these things matter, not just for women, for everybody.
Oh, no, it is a women's issue, but it is not just women who are involved or need to know.
Right.
And that was actually going to be the first question I asked you. And so earlier in this season, we read a book about artificial intelligence called You Look Like a Thing and I Love You. And we talked about how, social media algorithms, you get fed certain content based on context clues. And so I'm a young, recently married woman. I get so many videos and social media pushes about pregnancy and, raising small children. And every day I learn something new that is terrifying. I have a PhD in cell biology. I worked in a reproductive immunology lab. We worked in pregnancy. I thought I knew a lot, and every day I learn something that is terrifying, horrifying, fascinating, all of the above. Every single day. Why is this information about pregnancy and about childbirth and even child rearing? Why is that so hard to find? Has it always been that way? Is this new?
It's not new. It's not
Okay.
new. I mean, the first thing I would say, I'm struck by the fact that so much of what you're receiving is terrifying because
I
that
think
is
it's
also,
terrifying.
well, but that's also the role of social media.
That's fair.
Having just written a book on childbirth and midwifery, so much of what we're exposed to are the horrific stories. I mean, we get one in this particular book, but in general, when
And
you
we're not
turn
gonna
on the
talk about
TV, right, it's all about, water breaks and the baby's out within, and she's nearly dies, right? It's
Yeah.
always this extreme. And that, I think, is a larger fault in our society in terms of normalizing birth as a perfectly okay, natural thing, right?
Yeah.
We tend to overly dramatize it. And I love the fact that she refers quite a bit to how the Netherlands is quite different attitudes
Yes.
towards birth. It's so much more normal
Yeah.
to talk about. So on the one hand, it's unfortunate because childbirth isn't always like that.
Okay.
Okay. But you are walking, talking evidence of the fact that we still need to deal with that because you shouldn't be
Yeah.
afraid. And fear is part of what generates so much of the reluctance of people to trust their bodies. I think this is also a deeper story about believing in yourself and trusting that your body is capable of doing something, right?
Yeah.
That you need to stop thinking here and just relax. The other thing I'll say though, Sam, did we do this in your class? In my women in health class, I have all the students do a birth interview, and I get a lot of males in the class. Did we do it? So who'd you interview? Okay. Well,
At
the
11:52.
men always do their mother. And yeah, you probably did your mom.
Come on.
Your mom probably remembers it, even if you don't. But what I find really striking is and this is no offense to anybody in the room, but for whatever reason, I feel like childbirth from the outside feels very uncomfortable. But once you start talking about that, and they start thinking about it from that historical perspective and all of the factors that go into it, and then they have the opportunity to go talk to the person that oftentimes gave birth to them. And it turns out to be one of the best conversations they've ever had with their parent. I mean, they come in and I have goosebumps now. I mean, they come in and tell these incredible stories.
Yeah.
And often the conversation turns toward the mother saying, I never thought because something dramatic would happen, not terrible, just important in the story. And the child, the student would say, how come I never knew about this? And the mother would say, well, either I didn't think you cared, or I didn't think it was appropriate, or whatever. And it would end up really having a huge impact on their relationship. So everybody do this.
Yeah.
Go. It's incredible. And then it's so much more fun to read those types of papers than a book review or something, because every story is different and every story is equally valid.
Yeah.
Which is why everybody does want to talk about it. For those of you who have given birth, and it's incredible. You can't predict it, you can't control it, and at the end, obviously there's tragedies, but with the outcome, it's an incredible experience, and it's so unlike anything else we do.
Yeah, well, and I love how you talk about it so positively, and the importance of sharing that story too, because I find when you do, maybe it's because I'm a woman, when I talk to my sister-in-law, for example, she talks about it very casually, and it's something that she has no problem bringing up and sharing those details, and I find that's something that women share with each other, and the author talks about how important that is, having not only women, maybe not necessarily women, but having people to share in that with, and just to share in the, God, either wasn't that terrible, or man, we both really did that. We could both commiserate with the story and relate this story, and having that group connection with other moms. I mean, how important is that for, especially, I'm thinking a new mom, a first-time mom, and not having any, maybe you've never had that conversation with your own mother or any other, birthing woman. That would be so isolating. I mean, does that have an impact on women? Is that important?
Oh my God, it is so important. There's been so many studies done that show the level of comfort that the laboring woman experiences dramatically impacts the results, right? Raise your hand if you've heard of Ina May Gaskin. Has anybody heard? Okay. We have one Gaskin fan what? Oh, okay. Oh, you got to read my book then. Quick plug. Because she's in the book. I talk about her a lot. But she has this great, people are eating. I don't know how much I should say.
This is the problem with women. We have no problem sharing this.
Well, she just talks about, she calls it the sphincter law. There's certain things your body won't do if you're not in the right environment, okay?
Yeah.
If somebody opens the bathroom stall, certain things are not going to happen, okay? if you are feeling relaxed and comforted, you will open up in a way that otherwise you won't.
Interesting.
And there is very little in our current hospital system that encourages women to feel relaxed and confident. It's all about, we got to get the Pitocin in, we got to
Yeah.
get everything going, you've got to get all the EFM, the electric fetal monitor set up and all this stuff. And it's inherently terrifying to be in that kind of environment.
Yeah.
And so there's lots of studies done that, and I'm not saying, I mean, I know this is a contentious argument. Both of my children were born in a hospital, but this idea of the importance of valuing that the laboring woman can do it, is physically capable of doing it,
Yeah.
is really important, because if she doesn't believe in herself, it's terrifying, right? And then you end up feeling like, I need all this stuff, and if I don't have it, I'm going to die. And then I have all this stuff, and then I don't really remember what happened, because, it was sort of out of my hands.
Oh my
This is for
gosh.
normal. Obviously, there are many situations in which that can't occur, and thank goodness we have the technology we have
Oh,
to
of
ensure that
course.
happens. But in general, my main point is just making a woman feel confident. And so in answer to your question, for a young woman who has little exposure to this, who probably has seen the same things you do about the ER stories and everything, and this idea that, all these bad things could happen, it definitely makes it a terrifying experience.
Yeah. Well, and so when I feel like you're hinting at the fact that we have, and I say we broadly as like a cultural, societal norm, have shifted in the way we view childbirth and even pregnancy. And so I'm wondering why has the narrative around childbirth changed so much? And I will say I do feel like it's shifting maybe back towards empowering the woman. You can do this. Like like your body was not made to do this, but in a way, like you have the tools necessary. Let's not just immediately hook you up to everything possible. And like, home births are becoming more popular. Dualism midwives are becoming more popular. But why did that ever shift? Because that seems
Do you have like
the
6
better option.
hours?
Oh, God. Or a semester in your class.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, hospital birth is a very new phenomenon over centuries of time.
Yeah.
This idea of medicalized birth is a fairly recent phenomenon.
Medicalized birth. I like that term.
So it's about the medicalization of birth, which I'm trying to condense it because I could say a whole lot about it.
Oh my
but
gosh.
Two things happened. One is a shift generally from midwifery to gynecology. And in the US, unlike in the Netherlands and in the UK, gynecologists, obstetricians pretty much wiped out midwifery in the US. And part of it was simply a professional scheme, because gynecology in the late 19th century was looking for validation that in the midwifery model of care, childbirth is a natural event. And the most important thing you can do, other than make sure everything is going okay, is to be patient and let nature take its course.
Yeah.
And the obstetrical model of care is intervention. I'm overstating it, but I'm sure I'm seeing the midwifery student not, right? So it's definitely two different definitions of what's appropriate bedside manner. And so one thing that some of the early DeLee, Williams, Whitridge Williams, the people at Hopkins who are trying to establish American gynecology as a legitimate field, is that they have to say there's something more important, because otherwise, why do you need them? You can just keep with the midwives. So they start talking about that childbirth is not just medical, but a pathological condition, that there's something wrong. This is a body that is diseased, essentially, and that it requires an expert to come in with forceps and whatever else and kind of take over, right? So, and again, people are very opinionated about this, and I respect all opinions, and there's always situations where you need that model. But once you recognize that they're kind of talking two different languages, makes it easier to see. Now, so in Europe, midwives were not kind of eliminated. They collaborated. So in other countries, you have more collaborative type of care, and that was literally virtually eliminated in the US. And it's only really been a resurgence since the 1970s. I mean, 1940s, but really not until the 1970s. And it's still not fully accepted. I mean, a lot of people
Really?
have never heard of a midwife, and
Oh.
they think of them as something from the 17th century.
Yeah.
So that's problematic in that it makes it harder to have a situation in which empowerment of the patient is taken as seriously as the role of technology and all these other things.
Yeah, well, and it's not to say that modern medicine hasn't improved like mortality rates and helped both women
Sometimes.
and baby. Yeah, but yeah, the collaborative effort seems more beneficial for everybody involved. So is it that the US healthcare system is opposed to the addition of a doula or a midwife? to
Well,
that
I
equation?
mean, well, let me just ask, does anybody know where's the most expensive place in the world to give birth?
If it's not here,
It's in the US.
yeah,
Where's the safest place in the world to give birth?
probably anywhere but.
Where is the US ranked in terms of safety of birth?
Pretty sure it's low.
It's like
Low.
52nd, right? So this idea, if the US is advanced and you pay a lot of money to give birth, then why is it dangerous? You know?
Yeah.
And same with
Yeah.
infant mortality. I mean, there's a lot of good studies coming out now and a recognition in a lot of Louisville, New York City, putting money into doula programs, recognizing that doula programs, and maybe not everyone know, a doula is not a midwife. A doula is like a labor coach, essentially.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
But she is there, she or he, they are there to basically advocate for the laboring person. And studies have shown that the mere presence of that person often affects the outcomes, just having the
Wow.
advocate in the room. And so cities are investing in this. So there is a growing recognition that collaborative care is really, it's cost effective, right?
Yeah.
Because this is a person, how many people, raise your hand if you've given birth. Raise your hand if your baby was delivered by an OBGYN. How long was your OBGYN in the room with you? Like 3 minutes?
Oh my gosh.
They come in at the very end. They are not there. So the person that is there is a nurse or a midwife or a doula or your partner or something, but
Yeah.
it's not the doctor. The doctor has better things to do. It's not
Yeah.
cost effective for them to be by the bedside for the laboring
Yeah.
period. So that doesn't mean that what they do is not important, but it's not the ultimate experience is, you barely see this person. They wait until they can see the head and go, okay, right, push.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Oh my gosh.
So all of the team is very important, right? It's not just the provider that is responsible
Yeah.
for getting that kid out. And so all those things are important. I highly recommend, if you haven't seen, from Monty Python, Meaning of Life, the childbirth scene. I often show it I probably showed it in class, where basically the laboring woman, they can't find her. They all walk in for this delivery and they're like, where's the patient? And she's hidden behind all this equipment. And then, they wheel her in.
Gosh.
It's Monty Python, right? So it's very funny. And then she's like, what do I do? And John Cleese says, what do you mean, what do you do? You're not qualified, right? It's up to us. And it's humorous, but it really gets to the point where we get so lost in the technology. I interviewed a nurse who studied under the doctor that invented electronic fetal monitoring, which is measures the rate of the baby's heartbeat. And it's the go-to guide to C-sections, essentially. If something goes wrong on the strip, that's when they call in something. So she was working with him, Dr. Hone, H-O-N, and they're so busy studying, and the mother gives birth. and they don't even know it. They miss it because they're not paying any attention to her.
Oh.
And she, who was like a student nurse, said, "The baby's here." Right? I mean, so
Hey,
this
here it
kind
is.
of this kind of reliance, super reliance on technology
Oh
at
my
the cost
gosh.
of simply looking, measuring, palpating,
Yeah.
all of those skills that kind of get dismissed or overlooked at the, in honor of the great technology.
Yeah, well, and we've talked a lot about birth, and that experience I feel like you could separate this out into about 7 different
Oh, sure.
books. But I don't even want to, I don't know if to call it a discrepancy of care, because after the birth, it's almost like, okay, is the baby okay? Oh, mom's here too. You like feel fine, right? Okay, get out. I mean, the postpartum care is just, maybe is this just a US thing? Or, I mean, the author talks about it in the UK. There's really no follow-up. It's okay, 6 weeks, you feeling all right? Okay, great, get out. There's really no follow-up. And so is that another symptom of this hyper medical, I don't,
Yeah, I mean, I think it could be. My first child was born in Germany, and
Interesting.
we got a Hebamme, a midwife, came several times after the birth to the house to show us
Wow.
how to bathe the baby and,
Oh my
stuff like
gosh.
that, and make sure there was a heater over the changing table, because in Germany, the baby is never allowed to be cold no matter what, in any circumstances.
Yeah.
It's fun to think of all the cultural differences. But I think it speaks more generally to, yeah, the medical event is over, the baby came out, so the OBGYN, they've done their job. And the assumption is that, I think it gets more generally to the expectation that all any woman should ever want, or what they should strive for, is to be a mother. And so
Yeah.
why would they feel sad or
Yeah.
frustrated, and the mother then internalizes that and thinks, well, what's wrong with me, because I should be happy because
Yeah.
I wanted a child and my partner wanted a child and society wanted me to have this child, and yet, I'm struggling.
Yeah.
So I think it's not just a matter of technology or medicine. I think it's also the larger issue, which I think she's really getting at, which is,
Yeah.
why is it so complicated, and why aren't we talking
Yeah.
about that larger issue of that it's not a simple, fairy tale ending, boom, I got kids, life is good kind of thing.
Oh, no. Well, and it's the postpartum maternal care. Because, I mean, that healing process is not, it's got to be longer than 6 weeks. I feel like the 6-week timeline is arbitrary. Maybe not. I know, like I said, haven't given birth. I know nothing.
Well, I think she's great, right, at talking about those things that they don't tell you, right? Because you're so geared up to the event, the birth.
Yes.
And then, I mean, I remember the moment, she talks about this, when I'm in the shower and you're just, liquids are coming out of every orifice, not to be
Yeah.
gross. But you're not told about that. You're not told about the ugliness of how your body kind of feels like out of control.
Yeah.
In a way that I love that she
Oh,
talks
yeah.
about accepting that her body you shouldn't just go back to your former body. Your body has changed, and there's a reason why
Yeah.
it changed. It is never going to be exactly the same. But there isn't a conversation about how, what that's like. We read pregnancy books, but we don't read postpartum. This is what's going on here, and this is why you bleed, and this is why you're, all of that other stuff.
Yeah.
And I think, and on top of that, all of the stuff going on with hormones, I mean, it's perfectly normal that you would feel frustrated. And so you're right. I mean,
Yeah.
having conversations about it where it's okay, but then on top of it, you have the guilt. Like, well, I'm not supposed to complain because I have a healthy baby. And maybe I
Yeah.
had a really good birth, but now I'm struggling with all of these things. But I can't. I feel like I'm selfish for talking about it, rather than we should be talking about this. Like, this is my body and my identity, and everything's in upheaval, and I have a right to kind of talk about that.
Yeah. When she talks about her as a mother, totally different person. And me before motherhood, she said, that's a different, it's not just, I became a mom, but I'm still me. It's I am the mom. And I love the quote in the book, fatherhood is
A verb.
fatherhood is a verb. Fatherhood is something they do, but motherhood is an experience that becomes a part of the woman. The motherhood becomes a part of her identity, and she fully is. It totally changes her person. But fatherhood is just, yeah, I'm a dad. But no, saying I'm a dad versus I'm a mom has a totally different connotation. And she talks about it, in her social life, going to see friends of hers that she had back in college, and going, to the bar. And I'm a totally different person. I'm living a totally different life experience, and I'm going back to this other person. Is that something you experience? Is that something that's normal for mothers to experience? And I'm thinking even in terms of your partner and your relationship, she talks about how relationship satisfaction decreases after birth. And if you have multiple children, it could,
Yeah.
it decreases even more. Is that part of that? You feel like you're not the same person you were before you pregnant? And how does that ever come back? Maybe it doesn't.
Well, I mean, if we open it up at some point, it'd be interesting to hear people's responses,
Yeah.
because I underlined that sentence in the book because I thought it was really striking that fatherhood is something you do and motherhood you are, essentially. One's an identity and one's a verb.
Yeah.
And is that true? First of all, do we agree? I'm not sure we agree. There's a professor
Interesting.
at IU in the history department, Sarah Knott, who teaches history of women, history of childbirth, and she has a wonderful book called "Mother is a Verb." So,
Oh
and
my
it's
God.
and she takes examples from different cultures, contexts, but also time periods to
Yeah.
kind of tease out the nuances about these things that you go through between pregnancy and birth and breastfeeding, and things that stay the same, but then things that are also slightly different.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure I totally agree with it, but I would say politically, I would venture to say that one difference is that for fatherhood, well, let me rethink this. We live in a society where motherhood isn't necessarily a choice anymore, right?
No.
So if you're forced into motherhood without your choice, then yes, it's your identity because you didn't necessarily choose it.
Which is
Um,
terrifying.
So there's that sort of, if I don't control what my body does,
Yeah.
and it's imposed on me and it's not a choice for me, then it's my identity in a kind of a negative way. Equally, we could say fatherhood is equally important, which she would argue,
Yeah.
and it should also be a noun, right? A father, and I'm sure there are people in this room that feel very strongly, no, I disagree with that statement.
Yeah.
Fatherhood completely changed my life. But I think it's the expectations, because I think it points to a larger
Yes.
argument that the burden still, at the end of the day, in a society like ours,
Yeah.
the burden still falls typically, with many exceptions, toward the mother. She's the one, if
Yes.
she sacrifices whatever at work and then still comes home and is
Yeah.
found to do all these things. So probably at the end of the day, it's this hodgepodge of politics. We still live in a pretty traditional culture in which women are expected to do more in terms of raising children.
Oh, gosh.
And
Yeah.
then, reproductive justice issues on top of that.
And that's so scary. She talks about it in the book, in the 70s about, she tells a story about the teacher who gets ousted from her job. They say, you're not allowed to be pregnant at work. It was part of the contract you signed. I did not realize that happened in the 70s. Oh, you're pregnant? Oh, you can't have a job. And also you have no choice. You're just stuck being pregnant and no job. And
Right.
whoever's, supporting you, you're kind of beholden to them. The 70s?
Well,
I can't imagine. Maybe
hello, it's still a problem today.
Yeah,
It's
no,
not quite as
exactly.
bad, but
No.
so when I became a professor, and I was in my 30s, and I found out I was the first professor in the history of my department, this is not at Purdue, to ever be pregnant in the history of the department. And they didn't know what to do with me. So I go to my department head, who's female, and say, I'm pregnant. And she had never had children. And she said, oh, so do you want to take your research leave now? And I was like, no.
Your research leave?
Because I was guaranteed.
Time.
I said, no, I'd like to take maternity leave. But this is, I'll say it, University of Cincinnati had no maternity leave. I had to take sick leave.
Zero.
Zero.
No.
And so there was that. And I thought, and the only women in the department had, the women that did have children only had one. And then I thought, so is there like a rule? Am I like not allowed to have a second child? What will happen to my career if I have a second child? And then I did. I had a second child. And I was teaching a class on the history of sexuality. It was spring semester. And I wasn't showing at the beginning of the semester, but then by the end of the semester, I totally was, right? So I'm like looking around. They start leaning. They're like, what is that? So finally I came out. Yes, I'm pregnant. And I said, you know, one of the reasons why I look strange to you, I said, look around this university. Do you see a single other pregnant person here? And they were like, no. I said, yeah, think about it. I said, because it's still, if this was in 2003, it's still hard to juggle that. And, you know, I felt like a fish out of water just being pregnant. And then there's my whole breastfeeding story. I mean, there's so many things that just.
I wanted to ask about breastfeeding. Because there's, oh my God, okay, hold on, one at a time. So let's start with the working, because the maternity leave and the impact on your career. When I was a graduate student and I got engaged, the first thing my boss said to me was, oh, you're not gonna have kids, right? You need to wait till you graduate. Mind you, the other person in my lab, his wife got pregnant, and same boss threw a baby shower and was so excited for him. And
I hope you got mad at him.
I was so close to graduating, I couldn't. I wanted to get the degree and leave. But it was probably when and I'd always been told, don't have kids, it's terrible for your career, don't do it. And to know that really not much has improved. I mean, it's not just a pay gap, it's a promotion gap. It's well, you can't stay late anymore, so we're not gonna give you these projects that would make you stand out. That is so terrifying. And that, I think, for somebody like me who's early on in their career, it's something that I very strongly think about. And it's okay, like, how long can I wait until I tell it? I don't want to tell anybody, because what's going to happen to me? They're going to start, you know, taking me off of things, and I'm going to have to go to appointments, and that price you pay in your career. I mean, you're a professor now and you're obviously very successful, writing multiple books. I mean, do you talk to other academic moms? Is there do you just find those people out and say, hey, how did you do this? Is that the best way to learn, and how to navigate that space?
I think it's certainly one strategy, and I think social media has helped to a certain extent. There were a couple of other people that were hired the same year I was that got pregnant after me, and they went to that. They were better than me. They were sociologists. They were more, like out there, and they got the university to change to adopt maternity leave. So.
Probably 4 weeks, 6 weeks?
No, you would get the whole, it was on the quarter system, so you would get the quarter off. But for me, I didn't have anybody to look up to, but I then became passionate about mentoring junior faculty. So people would come to me and say, well, okay, how do you do this? How do you have 2 kids and negotiate tenure and then promotion to full and write and go to conferences and all that? So for me, I found that my role was to mentor other people around me and have those conversations, and as often as I could bring them up in department meetings, and push back when my department head said research leave, and point out that was ridiculous and inappropriate and all those things. So kind of networking and mentoring and having those conversations, and forcing people to talk about it, and to hand this book over to your advisor or whatever, and make people realize that how completely unjustifiable it is to make those kinds of comments.
Yeah. Well, and so how did, and I would even open this up to the audience, how do other, like those in your department, those you work with, how can they help somebody feel supported when pregnant, or even as a new mom in a work environment? How did people make you feel supported?
Yeah, well, do you want me to answer, or do you want to?
If
I
any-
have a couple of stories, but I've been talking a lot.
Because that seems the most terrifying part to me. You can go ahead and share a story. I'd love to hear.
Well, okay, so when I was interviewing for that job, I had a 6-week-old baby, and
Wow.
I was flying over from Germany, and he wasn't with me he was with my mother. I would fly out to these places, but, so I had to pump. And
That's
so
what I
one
wanna ask you
place,
about.
the professor was like, well, I'll just sit here on the bed with you while you pump, like before you go to dinner during your job interview. I was like, do you think you could wait in the lobby of the hotel and not
Interesting.
sit on the bed? And then a Catholic institution, when they were planning my interview trip, I said, I need breaks every so often to pump. And I get the schedule, and there's no breaks whatsoever. And I have to call and be like, I'm really sorry to inconvenience you, but and they're like, oh, no. Well, that one there, that's code for, that's when you're going to go pump. So.
Code.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, you didn't tell me that, but, and then they send me to rooms with like giant windows and no bathroom. So I'm walking down hallways carrying, I was just pumping and
yeah.
dumping, but still
yeah.
like, where do I, and, oh, and then he was driving it was a Catholic priest who was the head of the department, and he took me back to his apartment to pump before taking me to the airport, which was nice of him, but I just thought never in a million years would I picture sitting on this priest bed pumping, for a job interview. So just like, so I had to work on them to think about, and it's tricky. I mean, I didn't even have the job. I was interviewing. You don't want to like, you make a scene about it, but here's the reality of my messy life right now. I have leaking breasts. Like,
Yeah.
deal with it.
Oh my gosh.
You got to figure out a way to accommodate that. And if you can't do it for me, how are you going to do it for the people you hire and for your graduate students and for your sisters and your wives? Like, this is just the reality of what our bodies are doing right now, and you got to figure out ways to accommodate us.
Well, and what a great example of, yes, this is a woman's issue. This is us having to deal with breastfeeding, but even just having an ounce of thought, just thinking about it for 12 seconds. Oh, what would a breastfeeding mother, she needs to pump, what does that involve? Not maybe a sink, maybe not, 6-foot windows.
Yeah, exactly.
Looking over probably directly into someone else's office, let's be honest, because those windows are never a nice view. It is a men's issue. Just the education aspect of it, and just, I don't know, being supportive in a work environment, and you shouldn't have had to be the one to advocate that hard for yourself. Somebody, like, that's an ally, right? That's somebody who's saying, you know what, like, I should take on, you have so much going on, let me take this on, and let me be proactive, and let me be like this ally and get these resources that you need to, I don't know, survive and function like a normal human being. That's the floor. I mean, really, the bar is on the floor. The bar is underground.
But
and
the
we're not
thing is,
meeting it.
And she talks about this, if we want to compete, I want that job, she wants that promotion, what do? You gotta achieve even higher than the non-breastfeeding women or the men or whatever. So the problem is it's this upward spiral, right? That we never get to a point where let's just all take a deep collective breath and talk about what's best for our community. It's this scramble to prove ourselves that we can do it despite, rather than look at you're lactating and you're in a job interview. That's like high five, I mean, that's what I would do if I was interviewing, right? Like, make it okay, normalize it. Don't make it something that is forbidden, or, I mean, hidden is okay. Like, I don't really want to do it in front of my next boss.
Your potential boss,
but don't make it seem like this, weird thing that I'm asking for.
Like using code words. Oh, nobody else who sees the agenda can know that's what that's for.
Right.
Why? That is wild. Code words? Oh my gosh.
Maybe it's better. I mean, this was 20 years ago, so hopefully things are getting better.
I don't know about that one. I will say, to an N of 2 employers, breastfeeding rooms have been readily available and have been made aware to me
That's
as
good.
one of the first things when I got hired. Here's where you would go if that is something you need. So the accessibility portion maybe is improved. Again, N of 2, not a good sample size for anybody, but maybe it's improving.
Better than N of 0.
Better than that. You know what? I still don't think it's getting published, but we can try.
Yeah.
Well, and I even want to ask about I cannot imagine a world without having pumping, because that seems to open so many doors for breastfeeding and lactating women. I mean, what did you do before? Like, what are you just shot out of society for 6-8 months, a year, until you're done lactating, until you're done breastfeeding, before the invention of pumps? Or
Well,
is that an ignorant
again,
question?
no, it's not ignorant at all.
'Cause
But
I can't
was
imagine.
just to say that, like, if in the 1940s and 50s, breastfeeding was heavily discouraged by pediatricians. So
Discouraged?
Yeah, they were all they were all advocating for a formula. Formula was the way to go. Women were
Interesting.
actively discouraged from
What?
breastfeeding. Yes.
It is, I feel like it's the total opposite now.
Yeah, but that was not the case then. You
What?
really had to push if you felt strongly about breastfeeding in that context. The idea was the scientific formula was even better than mother's milk, and this was the way to go. So the assumption has not always been that breast is best,
Oh
first of
my
all.
gosh.
But second of all, I think I'm totally pro pumping, but I also think having my first child in Germany, where you could whip out your boob pretty much anywhere and it was fine.
Yeah.
I hate the fact that, I hated pumping. You
Really?
feel like a cow. There's no relationship with your child while you're doing it. So I also wish that we had better maternity leave, if that's what the mother wanted,
Yeah.
so that she could be there with her child, or flexibility, so she can go home if that's what she wants, or the child can come in. So in other
Yeah.
cultures, I think it's much more common. Either, people are less uncomfortable at seeing a woman breastfeeding, or they offer options so that she can have the physical contact and not just the machine.
Yeah.
But so it's not that I'm anti-pumping. I just think at the
No.
end of the day, who wouldn't rather do it,
Yeah.
for their child rather than this, if they can and they want to. It's all about the choice, right? But
Yeah, well, and I feel like in so many aspects of pregnancy and motherhood, it seems like there is no choice. Or if you do make a choice that seemed socially or culturally wrong, oh, well, that's not what we do now. Well, that's not what everyone's doing. That's not. I had the idea of, I've always been fed the message like, yeah, breast is best, breastfeed as long as you can. And so the thought of like, no, you want to wean as soon as possible and get on formula. I mean, what do you know what prompted that shift? Was it
milk formula, Nestle,
Yeah, yeah.
companies, pediatricians who were advocating it, because some of them really did think it was more
better,
scientifically. Actually, one of the books I brought is A History of Breastfeeding, and she
Oh,
talks
wow.
quite a bit about that. There were nutritionists that were studying this,
Oh, wow.
going back and forth about which was better, but literally it was in the minority for women to be breastfeeding in the 40s and 50s, and even in the 60s.
Wow. And was that just is that related to the workforce? If you stop breastfeeding, you can more easily return to work?
I think that's part of it. Another part, which is kind of chilling, is that she doesn't really go into this, but if you went into a hospital to deliver a child in the 50s and 60s, there's a good chance you were completely sedated, you were unconscious for the child's birth, and you did not see the child for the first 12 to 24 hours.
I'm sorry?
It is true. And
okay.
and
my
then
brain
at which
just
point
reset.
it becomes
Okay.
very difficult to breastfeed, because if you don't see you need to get them latched on early on. So
Yeah.
a lot of the women that I write about who become natural childbirth advocates in the early 70s do so because they've had horrific experiences of being strapped to the delivery table, knocked unconscious, and don't see their baby, and then try to breastfeed and can't. Because of course, there were no lactation consultants or any of that kind of thing. So that contributed to the idea, well, you don't need to breastfeed because we have something better, because we have this great formula that's better for your kid, will be smarter, dad can feed the baby, whatever. But so there may be people in this room. I mean, my mother, I'm the third of three. She was out for every single birth. She has no memory, didn't see me for, 12 hours. No idea.
I'm sorry, that just completely, my mind just, like, I'm buffering right now. I have a buffering window going in my brain right now.
There's a book that I can recommend.
No, please, because I'm fascinated by how it's changed so dramatically over time. I mean, because it feels like, almost like, I don't want to call it a trend, because that's a very, like, millennial social media term. But I mean, it does feel like certain aspects of, and she talks about this, like, with parenting, and how, like, parenting styles have changed with time, and it's very culturally related also. But and we can talk about, I think, the influence of culture even on some of those motherhood and birthing and even breastfeeding decisions. I mean, so much of that is influenced by the culture that we live in, and to, most of the extent that she talks about in this book, U.S. culture is not friendly to women and mothers, but is also really not encouraging, like, at all. And is there, and she talks about, well, she was from the Netherlands, and so a lot of her parenting influence comes from the Netherlands, and I'm doing things differently from mothers who are from the UK, and I'm, different styles of parenting and different approaches to, all these different aspects of motherhood. And she almost feels judged. And she says, my journey of motherhood, my experience of motherhood, I'm constantly being judged. I'm constantly being, the choices you're making are wrong. You should do this. And I'm getting advice that is totally unsolicited, that I didn't ask for. And I just wonder how much of, obviously a lot of that is culturally influenced, but how much of that can be uninfluenced? Or are we at a point with things like social media where it's just, you just kind of have to put on your blinders and do what you think is best?
Well, I think confidence is a big part of it. This goes back to your first question about being terrified of giving birth, because I'm thinking about that first-time mom. It's the same, the first-time mom maybe goes through an unpleasant birth experience, hasn't been conditioned to believe that she's capable, that she's okay doing it on her own. And that's the same mom that's trying to breastfeed and looking on social media and having friends or other people commenting because they don't think what she's doing. And so we're kind of conditioning women in many contexts to continue to not believe that they know what they're doing. So imagine if you were confident and you knew that you were fine with what you were doing.
Yeah.
That would just be like a little buzz around you. It wouldn't be something that was tormenting you because you didn't, it's none of their business.
Yeah.
The problem is women have not been conditioned to feel confident about the choices that they make in many situations. And so that buzz becomes that much louder in their ear, and it helps, it deflates them and makes them question everything they do. And then on top of it, my favorite part, because I really struggle with that, is this either or thing. It's like you can be a good mom or you can be a good, professional. But the minute you're good at one, it automatically means you're less good at the other. Because how could you do both?
Yeah, less good,
Every
less
minute
committed.
you're spending on your career, isn't it, you're taking away from your kids.
Yeah.
And once you're in that complex, like there's no way to win.
No.
If you've been conditioned to think that, it's very disempowering because any sign of approval on one end is a sign of disapproval on the other. And so that's why we need more conversations about, we got to get out of that loop that one positive equates one negative.
Yeah.
We need to just, I struggle with it. I'm sure everyone does.
Well, and I feel like fatherhood is not judged to the same extent, and men in the workplace are not. That assumption that I mean, there are so many assumptions about mothers in the workplace, but none of those seem to apply to fatherhood or in men in the workplace who are fathers. It's the same kid at home. I mean, why? I mean, there's got to be a level of deeply ingrained misogyny at play here for those assumptions about parenthood to only apply to the mother.
Yeah. And for me, I was hired in the same year as a male colleague, and we each had a baby. And he had a stay-at-home wife, and I had my kid in daycare. And every day he would comment about how degraded my child was going to be because they were in daycare.
Degrade
Well, just all the problems and whatever.
with daycare. Oh, yeah.
And did everything to put me down. And if I showed up at work and I wasn't at this or I didn't volunteer for that, so I was like rubbed in my face constantly. And this was a liberal-minded, progressive person that so I was constantly feeling, I internalized that and thought, well, yeah, I guess I'm really crappy mom, right?
Oh my God.
So it's really challenging.
Well, and I want to ask you about childcare, and the author talks about this in the book, that childcare and children from a public goods perspective. I think, what did they say? In 2020, the US spent more money bailing out a single airline than they did all of childcare, across all of childcare, when that was a huge issue for women in the workforce across COVID, something that has not recovered, by the way. Why are we not investing public dollars in childcare when it's such a central point, not only for, societal, for the continuation, I guess, of societal norms, but economically, where is that next workforce coming in from? They all, newsflash, all humans start out as children. All adults were once children. So why are we not, economically, you would think private capital would be invested in caring for children, providing resources for child rearing. And we just say, nah, that's a you problem. Why do we do that? Why is that not more ingrained in, especially the policy of family values? The political party of family values loves to talk about it, but then they're putting no money where their mouth is, and that mouth is everywhere yapping. I mean, what is happening there? Why are we not investing those dollars? It makes no sense.
Because it's women's work. It's not, it's less valued, right?
Because it's implied to be a woman's job, because it's a woman's problem. I mean, we talked about pregnancy as a choice. That's a woman's problem. That's not my problem.
And a lot of proponents of family values don't believe women should be working, right? That the children should be, that mothers should be home with their children for a certain amount of time. So that, okay. I feel
Vote
like
in the next
these
election.
poor people are sick of us talking. We should.
Yeah, so let's turn it to you all, and I'm less of a turn and talk and more of I'd love to hear from you, because there were multiple areas of this book where I was surprised. It was a new aspect of motherhood I had never heard about, or I'd never learned about, or I never thought about. Were there any aspects of this book that did surprise you? Any, for me, especially hearing about the cultural differences in motherhood and rearing were real interesting to me. And so what aspects of this book for you all, and you can raise your hand and Sam will come bring you a microphone so you can share, or maybe something didn't surprise you and you said, yeah, I've seen that, experienced that. Old hat. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
But then that takes the aspect of choice out of it. You chose not to stay home with your child, so why are you giving that choice of someone else? I thought that was surprising. I never would have
And paternity leave is so important. Oh my gosh. Is there anything else anybody would like to share? Maybe something that wasn't surprising. There were a lot of things everything in here surprised me. But apparently I don't know much about motherhood or childbirth.
Yes! Yes! I probably still have it somewhere.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. Did everyone catch that? So he did his mom. Okay. See, and she remembered it even if you don't. So at the end of the day, this is equally about valuing mothers, right? The fact that that was a profound experience for her, that she had oh, tell her you're
Aw.
welcome anytime.
Everyone call your mom. My mom is also a nurse and also vivid detail about everything, but also very medical in nature. Or if you have, we can also open it up to Q&A with our expert, because I feel like there are so many things that we would love to ask you about motherhood. I mean, there's so, like I said, this one book, I feel like could have been 5 separate books. Yeah.
My sister just had her first baby last week and the week before.
Wow.
Congrats.
So everyone's been super supportive. She has tons of support from our family, their family. But it also kind of feels like we're bombarded with more support.
Yeah.
So I kind of wanted to ask ways to go about how to support, moving on, baby, and everything out. Because everyone's trying to do the best part of it out.
Well, I have 2 thoughts, but could everyone hear the question? Okay. Oh, yeah, the speakers are that way. So 2 things. One is, with anybody going through a new process, remember that everyone is going to crowd them at the very beginning, right? Think about what's going to be like for her in 6 weeks or 3 months or 3 years, right? Think of support as a longer window. Because everyone's like, new baby, I got to do everything. So you could be the person that steps in after all those people go away, first of all. And the second is just to ask, right? And she may be too overwhelmed to know, but say, look, I feel like you got how's it going with so many people kind of interfering? What is it that you think you need most right now? And how could I be the person to help you? And it may be, do a load of laundry or take the kid around, I don't know, for down the street. I was thinking of a dog, but that's not, like take the
Take 'em
kid
for a walk. They
Um,
do have leashes now.
But so ask, right? Because I think people forget that they can just ask, that they assume, oh, you need more food or you need this or you need that, but just simply asking. But I would say the larger thing is the long-term window. And that's this isn't a critique of the book, but it's clear to me that this book is written by someone whose kids are still young because their story ends with toddlers. And I was saying to you that it'd be interesting to see what she would say differently 10 years from now when her kids are teenagers, right? That a lot of the emphasis on the mothering is dealing with small children. But, my wife and I have a 16-year-old, a 19-year-old,
Oh my gosh.
an almost 22-year-old, and a 23-year-old, right? So we're obviously co-parenting, right? We were both married to men, so we were dealing with fathers. Now we're co-parenting as 2 moms, right? Obviously, some things have changed along the way, and assumptions about what do fathers do, and what did mothers do, and what do 2 mothers do, and what does the stepmother do, and how do you deal with, the needs of a 22-year-old versus a 3-year-old? I almost feel like we need an addendum to address, motherhood down the line.
Oh my gosh.
Because it never stops. It's not like once they stop electrocuting themselves, you're done.
Yeah, you just hope they stop eating stuff off the floor. I don't know when that stops, but
Oh,
for my
well, no.
brother, it hasn't.
It doesn't. Just wait till they go to college and drink too much, and
Yeah.
then,
Oh, no. My brother is in college, so it sounds like nothing's changed.
you know.
Yeah, when you said that, the first thing I thought of was, I need to go call my mom, just say, I'm sorry. You said teenage years, and I apologize. Is there anything else about this book, or about anything else about this book you would like to either bring up or ask our expert? Any sort of question about the book or about motherhood? Because I'll be going to Dr. Google. That's what I'm doing. If I have questions, I'm just going to Dr. Google. But you are my Dr. Google right now.
So this question is economics has motherhood. There's a house of motherhood really interesting point about having more economic incentive to provide childcare due to market forces. And one of the things I noticed pre-pandemic, the labor market was very tight. Large companies like large biotech that I work for, they spend a lot of time talking about providing healthcare, childcare, and money for parents parents to help with childcare because they so and I was wondering if that's historical or just is potentially green shoot in more equity in that plan due to talking about the economic incentive of human beings in
Yeah. I mean, I am no economics expert. I would just say that, unfortunately, I think once you start having these conversations, you get certain people screaming, this is socialism. We're interfering too much. It's either it's socialist and, free market needs to reign and we don't want to interfere, or this isn't really important. It is women's work. This is not this is not our collective problem. And so we have other things to worry about, kind of thing. I mean, sadly, still in 2023, once something is considered a women's issue, it's fundamentally less important. Even if it makes economic sense to do it, even if it makes sense, because we all think, oh yeah, midwives, they're cheaper, right? Let's throw out all these economic reasons why the best, smartest thing you could do is to go with this system. They're still going to find a way around it. There's resistance to that kind of change and to this acknowledgement that if it's a women's issue, it matters, which is back to your point about Sweden. The value of making it about parenthood rather than motherhood, that this is an investment that is equally about a good father or investment in the father doing the right thing. But this culture is just not grounded that way. It is just, we are entrenched in this idea that this is a women's issue, a woman's problem, and therefore it's not worthy of political debate.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, but then look at, the gender divide in politics, right? It's not just about voting, it's getting women in politics. It's getting the right women in politics and the right men, the people that are going to value these things and recognize that there's an economic, among other things, that it could be for the betterment of society economically on top of socially.
Yeah.
If you don't mind my echoing on that, this is an area where we really can be our allies.
Yeah.
I am a midwifery student. I'm also currently a nurse in New York, in Indianapolis Hospital. I deliver babies for a living. If I have a baby, I have to use my sick leave and short-term disability to cover my own maternity leave. We do not have the maternity leave that we deliver babies for a living. I've seen many of my colleagues ask for donations of PTO so that they can extend their maternity leave from 12 weeks to 16 after having perhaps an emergency C-section. So again, this is an area that has been considered a women's issue and therefore considered less important. And this is an area where we need them to speak up and talk about the importance of this as an issue that benefits all of us. No baby is over time by having mom home for 16 whole weeks. That is something that benefits all of us in the long run.
Absolutely.
I just want to thank you both for speaking to the violence within the history of obstetrics. I am currently in school to become a midwife, and there are so many of us doing this right now because we recognize that we come from a long history of violence against women, particularly against women of color. And this is just such an important area to get back to trusting bodies to do what they're supposed to do, what they're supposed to can do, and empowering women, empowering working people. So I want to thank you very much for facilitating all of this. I very much enjoyed watching your brain split open at that discussion about twilight birth. There are so many elements of that, of obstetric history that are really violent, and when you truly look at it from that perspective, it's jarring, because you're right, and we can do better, and we should do better, and we're getting to do better.
Amen.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we
Snaps to
yeah,
you all.
we thank you for doing the hard work.
I was going to say, for every woman, I mean, that's a life change. 'Cause I can't wrap my brain around it. I truly cannot wrap my brain. And we talked earlier, we were like, do we want to mention pelvic exams? Because I mean, you want to talk about violence.
Yeah, I don't think we have time for
We
that.
do not, but
I do. Do you know what's going on with IU Arnett getting rid of all their midwives? Yes. No. Yes, I know.
what?
Yeah. Yep.
Showing up
Completely
to-
agree.
yeah.
Yes,
Oh,
I was
Lord.
informed, and I was just absolutely horrified.
Yeah.
I have I brought it up in my women in health class, and I have a male student who has a 2-year-old who they delivered with a midwife at IU Arnett. And they were on the picket lines complaining. And he said they're actually considering not having another child because they don't feel comfortable. I mean, it's that deep that people are making reproductive decisions because of that kind of thing. And that discussion just isn't taking place. It becomes fiscal, right? I mean, it wasn't profitable.
Yeah. When I mean, what's terrible too is so much of reproductive decisions are not about, well, what do I really want? No, it's about what fiscally, what are the policy considerations I need to make? What are the cultural and social and career ideas that I need to consider? Like, I want to go for a promotion in 2 years. I got to wait till then to have a kid. Or I shouldn't have two because I'm already busy with one and I already had to miss out on that project. And the last thing I'm thinking of was, well, what do I actually want? I'm the last person I'm thinking about in my in my family planning decisions. I'm sorry, we're in the year of Ariana Grande's 2023, and I'm not even considering my own thoughts and feelings about this. It blows my mind that we have made progress. There are many. I mean, obviously in the U.S. we are very far behind in so many aspects, but I mean we have made progress, and here we are. Progress feels not great yet. When is it going to feel good? Seemingly not anytime soon.
Yeah.
But that's why I love your emphasis on conversations. We have to be open about this. We have to talk about it. And I'm about to make it everyone's problem. And maybe that's what I need to do. Well, I already did that anyway. Ask anybody who knows me.
Oh, no.
What do you think like is the next hurdle or the next technological advance that the motherhood complex will face in the next 10 to 20 years?
Oh my God.
History is cyclical, right? So do you see something coming back around that we have to deal with again, or do you think there's something new coming?
That's such a good question.
That's a really good question. I mean, I think overturning Roe is just completely, I think it's a complete disaster. So I gave a talk on the pelvic exam for grand rounds for the OBGYN at Northwestern Hospital just a couple of weeks ago. And right before mine was someone talking about, was it when you get placed out of medical school, the matching?
Yeah.
And the number of people who are now refusing to go, we are going to have these maternity care deserts like we've never seen before, because who wants to go deal with that crap? Even if you're not interested in abortion, but you're dealing with pregnant women who have ectopic pregnancies or something go wrong and you can't do anything to help them. So I think the next step is that's just a complete mess. And for everyone, regardless of your position on the issue, more and more women are going to die from this, and fewer people are going to obstetrics and gynecology because it's too messed up right now. And so everybody's reproductive health care is going to pay the cost. And more people are going to, I don't know, get sterilized, make risky decisions as a result of this. So no question in my mind, that's this fundamental hurdle. And it's terrifying because I don't see a way out of it anytime soon. But that's the part that the fact that med school students are not going to accept positions in entire states. Like,
Oh my gosh.
how are you going to get health care in these states?
When I'll talk, and I talk about this all the time. I'm from Florida, and I frequent,
sorry.
Any problem you have with me, just blame it on the Florida public education system. That's what I tell everybody, because Lord have mercy. But I talk about all the time. They would watch me die. God forbid something goes wrong in your pregnancy and you need medical care. And you're assuming there's a doctor there that will say, you know what, this is an emergency, you need it. I don't want to live in a state and work in a state that would watch me, oh, you're not close enough to death. I'm sorry? Oh, what? That's not a medical term. That's not a medical nothing. That is so beyond me. And so the fact that there's not even going to be a doctor there to tell you you're in a medical emergency and you need treatment, I'm going to treat. The mortality, the increase in mortality rate that is about to happen is happening. It feels like it's only getting worse, but it is something that I think about all the time, especially early in my career. I'm thinking, okay, like if there is a next step for my career, where am I going? And people going to school, oh, I can't go to that school anymore because if something happens, I'm going to have to travel to another state, or I'm going to have to find care. We're at a point where you can't even get care.
Yeah.
That is terrifying.
Yeah.
And I feel like, we're in the spring of the year, but as we enter into the fall of the year, we enter primary season. Next year, we're entering an election season. It is so important to register to vote if you're not registered. It is so to actually go out and vote and to participate in any sort of registration efforts you can, voting efforts. Drive your family, drive your parents, drive friends, do couples, a lot of employers are offering time off now to go vote. I know we're early in the election cycle, in the election season. The elections happening this year in your local elections are just as important as the ones happening next year that you're already getting ads about. Okay? So we have, as we go into the fall and we go into the summer, vote, 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 vote. It is so critically important to this book, this conversation, and the hopes that me and people like me, can have these conversations and can continue to expand on this book so that I can learn about the troubles of parenting a teenager, because I think that is 2 or 3 books. Anytime I talk to my mom about it, it's a novel. So I can only imagine having an actual professor writing a book about parenting. I think you need to write that book. What I'm hearing is you have another one on the docket. And so with that, I want to go ahead and close out. Do you want to plug your books? So you said you have 3 books. What are they called? And where can we find them?
Well, I brought a bunch of books, if anyone, just in
Ooh.
general on this type of topic.
I will be taking
I'll just-
pictures for sure.
I won't plug mine in a moment, but I just
Oh, you should. You have a website.
Did we read this? I love this book, The Body Project, An Intimate History of American Girls, Joan Brumberg, who she takes on the issue of female adolescence historically, mostly by looking at diaries of teenage girls anywhere from 1880 to 1990. And I love about it, it's a little outdated now. She doesn't do great on race per se. I usually actually assign it now. I juxtapose this book with Roxane Gay's book, her memoir, Hunger. But I love the way in which she takes the concept that a body has a history, right? So this is my history plug, because this is really more about science and present day stuff. But this idea that particularly for American girls, your body is a series of projects. Right, so she has a chapter on menstruation, a chapter on acne, and looks at historically how the meanings and expectations change. Why we came up with the training bra, for example, which if you read or saw Are You There, God Is Me, Margaret, you get a sense of that. But so understanding the importance of history and the ways in which things change and expectations, what a body should look like, what does it mean if you have a pimple? Because does anybody know what it meant in like the 1880s? It meant you were having very lascivious bad sexual thoughts. Imagine the picture of a pimple
Oh my gosh.
if it means you've been thinking about sex, not just as acne. So anyway,
gosh.
and also the value of thinking about what kind of sources historians use, that once we talk about women's health issues, we need to be more creative at how we look at them. And suddenly, a private diary can hold some meaning in it that we don't necessarily think of as historically valuable,
Yeah.
right? This
Oh my
gets
gosh.
to my larger issue of like why just these kinds of discussions are important, and because we assume they're too hidden to find. But if we look in the right place, often we can find that, and we can tease out some meaning and implications of that in a way that when we traditionally look at sources that tend to be more male-oriented. So that's what I love about that book. And then I